Hello, everyone, and welcome to this card review. With me, I have Pandemonia from
No.
co-host of Magma Rages, obviously, and we're going to be reviewing the Druid cards from Knights of the Frozen Throne today. So, quick disclaimer: these are obviously pre-release reviews, and we haven't had a chance to play with these cards yet, so we might be wrong on some of these things. Although
We
I highly
probably
doubt
are
it.
wrong.
Oh, okay. You have a very different confidence level to me. Um, but we're also going to be giving some decks, and these are just really ideas to help facilitate discussion and facilitate our understanding of the cards. Because, once you actually try to put these cards in a deck, you actually begin to realize, well, why would I play this card over, this other existing card or, something like that. So, yep. So we're going to be doing a rating system, 1 to 5 for playability. This doesn't necessarily mean like a 5 mean or a 4 means the card is like broken or 5 means it's broken. It's just, let's say 4 means, it's going to be played in a lot of decks, or it's going to be generally commonly seen kind of thing. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily like the best card in the set or something, right? It's just more
Yeah,
about how often are you going to be seeing these cards.
and I think also the important thing is it's also not necessarily it's a case of just because a card is good doesn't mean we'll actually see playing it. There might not be the right deck to support it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we might rate a good card low on playability,
But see,
and
because there's no deck currently for it.
yeah, and then maybe in an expansion's time that totally changes, and all of a sudden the playability is a lot higher. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Uh, and yeah, enough of the disclaimers though. We can get right into the reviews. And as with all the classes, we're going to be starting off with the Death Knights. Death Knights are the big new thing in Knights of the Frozen Throne. They're new hero cards essentially that replace your hero with a new Death Knight hero, and they give you usually some kind of battle cry, or in this case, choose one effect, as well as some armor and a new hero power. So for Druid, we have Malfurion the Pestilent. These are all legendaries as well. He is a 7 mana hero card, gives you 5 armor as with all the other hero cards, and he comes with choose one, summon 2 poisonous spiders or 2 scarabs with taunt. And on top of that, he changes your hero power to also be a choose one based hero power. So the new hero power becomes Plague Lord, which is choose one plus 3 attack this turn or gain 3 armor. So pretty interesting hero power. Your first thoughts on the card?
So for me, the battle cry is a little bit underwhelming. Like it's not. I don't think it's as powerful as many of the other Death Knights. But
Mm,
for me, the standout is the your upgraded hero power. Essentially, in my mind, becomes absolutely crazy. Like people have been comparing it to Justicar True Heart. I mean, so obviously, me, the love of being tanky. Being able to gain 3 armor each turn is obviously very good against control decks. I mean, against aggressive decks.
hmm
Whereas on the flip side, the +3 attack allows you to kill most, small, medium-sized threats, and it also allows you to actually put a clock on a control deck.
Yeah.
Because previously your hero power of deal 1 damage was not really much of a threat. Whereas if you're doing 3 damage each turn, it starts actually adding up, right?
Yeah, it's no die insect, but it is at least something that can allow you to provide a clock, right? And against other, let's say, warrior, a control warrior or a control priest, at least you are also netting damage, which is important, right? The fact
Yeah,
that you're hitting 3 damage rather than just two means you can actually put them under pressure. And there is a clock on them, however slow it is. I don't think we're going to see many games ending in this way with just sort of Plague Lord clock, but it is a possibility. And as you say, the versatility to also gain 3 armor if you're behind, or you can use it the first turn to kill a minion, then the second turn to recover a bit of the damage you took from killing that minion, right? So
exactly.
that's another one of the things. And I think also what it helps with is Druid has traditionally had a weakness at killing sort of small to medium sized minions. You only have a limited number of wraths and swipes in your deck, and this helps to deal with those kind of minions later into the game after you've used your swipes and your wraths or
Yeah.
something like
So
that.
and just going back to the choose one, the 2 poisonous spiders are obviously going to be very powerful on an empty board late game.
Well, I mean, they're most powerful against a single big threat, right? Because
Yeah,
on an empty board, your opponent's not going to play into the spiders. Whereas
exactly.
against
So it
a
kind of,
big threat, like let's say, an 8/8 Van Cleef or a Lich King or something like that, some other big threat, the Spider Plague at least threatens to kill them, kill that minion. So
yeah.
they have to find some other way to deal with the spiders.
Whereas the taunt scarabs allow you to kind of, if stabilize versus aggressive decks, 2/1/5 taunts buys you a little bit of breathing room, to perhaps try and restabilize and try to bring back the board.
And to use your hero power to clear up the board, right? The one big
Exactly.
thing with the 2/1/5 taunts is like the weakness of 1/5 taunts is obviously just they don't trade very well, but now the fact is they're just protecting your hero from taking some additional damage whilst you can use that Plague Lord hero power to actually clear up minions.
Yeah.
So
So yeah.
yeah, so ultimately, what do you think this card would be in terms of rating? What do you think of Malfurion the Pestilent?
I really love this card. So what's the scale? 1, 2, 5, we're
One
saying,
to
or
five, yeah. But in terms of playability, right? So even if you really love the card, is this going to
I
be
think it's
seeing
very playable.
play?
I think it's very playable. So I think what 5 is the most playable. I'm gonna go with like 4.5.
Oh man, we're going into halves. Okay,
Okay,
that's
well, okay,
fine.
I'll go 5. Okay, let's leave it. Okay, let's go straight on the numbers. I'll go 5.
Okay. I personally, I think Malfurion's biggest issue is that I don't really see what deck really wants him. We're going to be discussing this a little bit later, but I feel that he really screams like some kind of control druid, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that's entirely there, outside of let's say ramp druid, if you would maybe consider that a control deck, but it's not really, in my opinion. So I think Malfurion might have a bit of a sticking point there. I think he is well costed, a lot cheaper than a lot of the other Death Knights at 7 mana, and that's important because it allows you to do something else in the same turn. And in
As well as
Druid,
probably hero power. Like late game, you
yes,
can play it and hero power. That's
yeah.
the important part.
And for Druid, you can also ramp him out a lot earlier, so
And
it's significant there.
and I
Um,
believe they've clarified that he will synergize with Fandral.
Fandral, yeah, yeah,
Both the battle cry and the upgraded hero power will basically work with Fandral, which means if you have Fandral when you play Malfurion, you'll get both the spiders and the scarabs.
yeah,
And then when you hero power, you'll get 3 attack and 3 armor, which is,
yeah.
it's basically like one of the other new cards. It's like Nash in each turn.
Yeah, so the important part there is that Malfurion obviously does synergize well with Fandral, and to be honest, I think it just makes Fandral a bigger threat rather than necessarily being much better for Malfurion. Like, if you can think about it, the times you actually get off like Fandral plus an expensive card is pretty rare because Fandral has to stick a turn for it to
Yeah,
happen, but it just means when you do, it's gonna snowball a
it's
bit
gonna be
more.
crazy. Like I can,
Yeah.
you're gonna see the Trollden videos of like, Fandral nourish like Malfurion.
Yeah.
It's gonna be.
Okay, so back to my actual rating, which is where I was going with all of this.
Yes.
I actually think that Malfurion is a good card. I think that it could well see play in the future, but I don't believe that the archetype is necessarily quite there to support it yet. So I'm actually going to give Malfurion a 3 out of 5 for playability, right? That's
Uh,
the key here. It's playability. Like, I think Malfurion
uh,
is, if I just had to rate it on whether it's a good card, maybe it's a 4. But for playability, I don't really see it finding space in the current Druid archetypes we're seeing, and so for that reason, I'm gonna. I think you could maybe slot it into Jade Druid. It's not impossible,
yeah.
but I'm gonna give it a 3.
Yeah.
I don't think even if you put it in Jade Druid, it makes Jade Druid much better. I don't think it changes much there, right? Like,
Yeah. I don't think so. Like, if anything, I think Big Easy Druid or like another sort of controlly slow Druid, which I think we might see evolve.
yeah, but we'll be getting to that when we get to
Yeah.
our deck lists. And speaking of slow cards, the other legendary from the set for Druid is Hadron Ox. Hadron Ox is a 9 mana 3/7 beast minion, and it has Death Rattle. Summon your taunt minions that died this game. So that seems like a whole lot of value to me. Pandemonia, do you like it? I know you like value.
I like value, but I look at a 9 mana 3/7 and I go, okay. So the problem I kind of have is it's got high health, right? So the thing is, and its effect is a death rattle. So now the problem is, you've got like a lot of times if you play that against me, I'm not going to purposely try kill it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to just leave it. So you're going to have to try and essentially suicide it to kill it to summon your taunt minions.
Yeah, so like what's the delay on summoning taunt minions? Obviously, you play this, so you're not summoning taunt minions that turn. And then the next turn, maybe you attack. If you can't trade it off that turn, like maybe you have to use a spell to force the taunt minions to come back. So that's
Ugh.
maybe a one turn delay at the best. And then we're talking maybe if you can't do that, then it's another turn, and that's two turn delay. And like if you're in a
Yeah,
desperate situation where you need your taunt minions back, are you not just dead
yeah,
in those two
exactly.
turns?
A 9 and a 3/7 isn't saving you.
Yeah.
Um,
Every turn
the,
you're delaying, you're falling further behind on board because the 9 mana 3/7 is really not contesting the board.
I mean, the potential synergies here. It's obviously if you get this off Barnes. But the problem is even if you get off Barnes early on, the question then begs, how many taunt minions have actually died? But when let's say you Barnes it on turn 4 or 5,
Exactly, that's the big thing, right?
that's the
This
problem
death
as
rattle
well.
is, even though it's a really strong death rattle, it's only a really strong death rattle on like turns maybe 15, 16 most of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe on like
I mean,
9 it could be good, but you know, like most of the time it's a death rattle you want to play quite late into the game, and then I'm not sure whether it really has the kind of impact you're hoping, because
you
if
can still try combo it with like Mark of the Wild or what's it? What's the other one that gives a taunt? There's
Mark of
the one that gives
Mark of
+2
Nature.
+2 and taunt, and then the one
Oh,
that
that's
gives
Mark of the
plus,
Wild.
and then there's another one which is +3, +4 health and taunt or +4 attack. What's that one? The 3 mana one,
Mark of
Mark of the
Nature.
Nature.
Yeah.
So I mean, but ultimately, I also it's always handy to compare this, and I kind of ask myself, how often is this better than Scenarios, even as a 9 mana Druid Legendary?
Yep.
And I sit there going, I'll probably want to be playing Scenarios
A fair
every
portion more of the
time.
time. Scenario
You know,
is better on board, not just because of the 2/2/2s that you get, but also because it's a 5/8, right?
yeah.
So it contests board a lot better, whereas 3 damage late into the game really doesn't do much.
And the taunts. I mean, there you get two taunts, obviously.
Yeah.
Whereas the problem is Hadron Ox also requires you to kind of you have to build your deck. So now you have to run more taunts. So obviously, I mean, the question is if this is going to a Jade deck, maybe you're running Jade Behemoths. But then what other taunts are you?
I
And
mean,
I'm not
it's
sure.
Jade Behemoths and Primordial Drakes, right? That's the
And I mean, you might have
and
to run
bringing
Dark
back
Mirror
a Jade
Codes.
Behemoth is like pretty bleh. You're not getting the battle cry. You're not getting any real
Yeah.
great value from that. Like the big cards you want to bring back with us, right? Primordial Drake, and I believe bringing back Ancient of War would work too
Does it work?
because it's a choose one, right? So
But
so
no, it
the
doesn't
way
count as a taunt minion though.
no, but the
Like
way
that's the problem.
well, I don't know, but I mean I know for Druid of the Claw it would work
No, it
because
won't work
it
because
will, because if you resurrect Druid of the Claw, he comes
it
back
has
as a
taunt.
4/6. So I'm pretty sure Druid of the Claw it will work.
But
But
I don't think Ancient of
I'm
War.
Ancient of War I think is slightly different because it's a buff on Ancient of War rather than transforming the minion into
Yes.
something, which
Yeah.
is
So
yeah. So if this is not bringing back Ancient of War, that means its synergy and Druid just kind of drops a lot as well.
and Sunwalk. You have to go back to old school cards like Sunwalker.
I mean, there's
The
some new cards like Lich King, but like,
yeah,
what game is going long enough that you need all that value and like, you
and the
know,
fact that they taunt means you're
yeah,
trying not to die.
yeah. So
So
I
yeah,
think I think we've said enough. I don't think either of us are very impressed by Hadron Ox.
no,
I'm gonna go and give this a one for playability.
yeah, I'm gonna give
Uh,
this a 1 as well.
yeah.
I'm gonna agree with
So
you.
not definitely not a card I would suggest anyone crafts.
Yeah,
The
I
crazy
mean we might be
scenarios look really
surprised.
good, but yeah, it's going to be a very, very particular meta, which I'm not sure is particularly likely for Hadronox to see much play.
Yeah, no, I'm not sold.
Yeah. Okay. And then next we have a very interesting card, Ultimate Infestation. This
Oh,
is
this
a
card.
10
Oh,
mana epic druid spell, and it reads deal 5 damage, draw 5 cards, gain 5 armor, and summon a 5/5 ghoul. So that was a lot of fives. This card is trying really hard to get that rating of 5.
and to
But
clarify, it's not a choose one. I know
yeah,
some people got a bit confused. You get all of those effects.
yeah, all of them. So you get 5 damage, 5 cards, 5 armor, and a 5/5 ghoul.
Yeah.
Is that enough to give it to get it to score it a 5 out of 5, Dale?
I think so. This is, as a level of value, this is this is. It reminds me of a card from Magic the Gathering called Cruel Ultimatum, and this is the ultimate definition of value because you're basically okay. So you're drawing 5 cards, so you're netting 5 cards. Then
Yep.
you're dealing 5 damage. So let's say you're killing something. You're essentially netting 6, right? In terms of like for 1 card, and then the ghoul is probably going to trade. So I mean, this is potentially a 7 for 1.
Well,
Card.
you're netting 5, maybe 6 at the most, because by killing one with this card, you draw 5. That's only netting 5 because you used one to kill one.
Yeah, and then
So
you can net 6 from
it's
the
6 minus 1, and then if you count the 5/5 as a card, then it
yeah.
goes up to 6. But I wouldn't
Yeah.
count gaining 5 armor as a card.
No, I would. So
So
so 6 for 1, I
it's
think.
maybe you're gaining 6. Well, it's 7
Yeah,
for 1.
7
You're
for 1.
netting
Yeah,
6. Yeah, that's
you're
all.
netting 6, which is like amazing. In as a control player, that's that's the trades you want. That's the card advantage. We're rolling about, and that's all 1 card, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's crazy good. I mean, people have compared it to Finance Portal, or basically even more recently. I mean, like Ancient of Law,
Yeah.
because 5/5 body, but then you
So
get the extra.
I mean, as much as we like these
Okay,
effects are
I'll
really
be right
good,
back.
right?
Need to go kick the phone.
Sure. So even though these effects are really, really great, the big question that is being begged by this card is a 10 mana spell really playable? Like if you compare this to, 10 mana cards that actually do see play, something like Deathwing. Deathwing does a lot more on the board, actually clearing up the whole board as well as giving you a 12/12 minion, even though it's obviously a lot more of a negative for card advantage. In any kind of slow game, Ultimate Infestation obviously does present a lot of value, but in a faster kind of game, really is 10 mana actually going to be playable, right? This is always the struggle we've seen with cards that are costed this highly. And I think that's ultimately going to be the telltale sign for Ultimate Infestation for me. I think that the card has a lot of potential, but whether you really want to be running 2 copies of this as well is another question. Like whether 2 copies of Ultimate Infestation is too many in your deck because it's 2 clunky draws, or you
Sorry.
don't really want to be drawing 10 cards from 2 cards. That's a little bit too much as well. So yeah, basically what I was saying is like I'm not sure. The biggest downside and the biggest issue with Ultimate Infestation is, you know, it's spending your whole turn doing it. It's 10 mana. You can only do it later in the game. 5 damage on 10 mana is a lot weaker than earlier in the game.
Yeah.
Same is true for 5 armor and a 5/5 ghoul. The big sticking point is that you are drawing 5 cards, and that's pretty good late in the game most of the time. So the big question is 10 mana going to make this like is 10 mana too much? Like
It's
simply
possible.
because 10 mana is all your mana, right?
Yes. The chances are against an aggressive deck, you're probably still dead before this. This might help you stabilize. I mean, being able to kind of gain the 5 armor,
I mean, against
but
most aggressive decks, they're sort of wider on the board, right? And then dealing 5 damage and
it's not as
running a
relevant either
5/5
as
is
well.
not as good, no.
But I mean, against control decks, this is obviously a nutty card because the game goes into the late game, and this is obviously a perfect late game. It gives you the refuel, it gives you gas, it gives you a threat.
So I
So
think one of the things to actually compare this to is Kazakus potions.
yes,
We've seen Kazakus potions for like 10 mana that deal what 8 damage, summon an 8/8, and draw 3 cards. I believe that's the
no, there are
close.
only 2 effects. Kazakus was you had
Oh,
to
right,
choose 2.
Kazakus is only 2. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
So you
Um,
would, let's say, deal 8 damage and summon 2 minions, or deal
or
eight
3
damage to summon
damage.
an
It
8/8.
was it was 3 minions. But yeah, point
Yeah,
is like if you look at this for a Kazakus card, right? Something like very often Kazakus potions, it was actually just better to pick the 5 mana ones so that you could do other things on the same turn.
yeah,
And for the 10 mana ones to really be worth it, they needed to be that like massive board wipe and board swing. And Ultimate Infestation, if you're too far behind on the board, is actually just not going to do enough a lot of the time because you're only dealing the damage to 1 minion and you're only summoning 1 minion. And
yeah.
so, the big thing that's really is the card draw to me. Once again, I think that's
Yeah.
going to be the telltale sign is whether decks really want that card draw.
And if the meta slows down a little bit, like I say, I mean, you're still going to be run over by aggro decks. This isn't going to save you against Pirate Warrior.
Yeah, or token shaman or token druid.
Yeah.
It's not really going to work against those decks. Doesn't even work against something like, let's say, Miracle Rogue. It's pretty weak there as well. So ultimately, I don't think this is going to help in a lot of Druid's weak spots, and I think that's the one big concern I have for the card. So I'm actually gonna. I really like the card, and I really want it to be playable, but I actually am only gonna give it a 4. I think that's honestly, I'm overrating it. I think it's probably closer to a 3, but because I think that there may be some decks we can work it into, or some decks that it can be a really big top end for, and it is so much value, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4. What is
Yeah.
your rating gonna be?
I'm also going to give it a 4. I would love to give it a 5, but like you say, it's unfortunately it's because it costs 10 mana is a lot, and it's all about you have to be alive at 10 mana to play it, right?
Yeah.
It's no good having this amazingly powerful card if you're dead like turn 5, 6 all the time. So yeah, I'm gonna go, and I'm also optimistically gonna say a 4.
Okay. So yeah, at least I thought maybe you were gonna say a 5 there because I know how
No,
much you like this
unfortunately,
card.
I can't, because as much as I love the card, it's a super slow late
Yeah.
game card, right?
And the other question is, once again, in most decks where you would play it, would you actually play 2 copies of it? Is another question.
Yeah, I would
Which for
never
an
play two
epic,
copies. I would hardly ever play 2 copies, unless the meta becomes like only control.
yeah.
I'm mostly, if I'm running, I'm going to be playing 1 copy of it.
But even in mostly control, you draw 10 cards. That's not usually that good in control mirrors
Yeah,
from
you
two
might have
cards.
to then run like Jade Idols, just to avoid fatigue, right?
Yeah. Okay. So next, we have another epic from Druid. Do you want to tell us what this card is?
Okay, Fate Spinner. Uh, 5 mana, 5/3 minion, and you choose a Death Rattle. But the interesting, and I think this is the only card in the entire set
Hmm.
where the Death Rattle, you choose it secretly. So the whole point is your opponent doesn't know whether you've picked deal 3 damage to all minions or give all minions +2/+2.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird sort of.
All
It's either
friendly minions.
no, all minions.
Is it all minions?
Yes, deal 3
Oh.
damage to all minions or give them. And the only
Oh.
minions that
Okay.
reference there is or. So you
Yeah.
either.
Okay.
So as much as it's secret, I think the thing with this card is, the versatility is great, but depending when you're playing it, I suspect it's going to be quite obvious,
Yeah.
which one your opponent pick. If you're playing this on an empty board and your opponent's got a full board, it's pretty, I'm pretty sure they picked deal 3 damage to all minions, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if they played it on when you've got a board and your opponent doesn't have a board, you've picked the buff. That's kind of the only thing I see with this card being a problem.
Yeah. It's secret, but really not all that secret. Like in any good game, I wouldn't expect many people to be surprised by the choice, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I actually like now that I think about it, it's not. I did think it was great, but I'm actually starting to think it's a lot less good.
But if we look at it as ignoring the secret parts and the fact that that's kind of underwhelming, are the effects not still pretty good, right? The fact that it has to die to give the buff is a bit questionable.
Yeah,
Can trade relatively well. It's 5 mana for a 5/3 though. That's very bad in terms of stats. But it'll die relatively easy, so giving the buff to your minions works. But we've seen cards like this before. Spawn of N'Zoth, I believe it was, the 3
yeah.
mana 2/2 that gave +1/+1 to all your minions, and that really never saw any kind of home, right? Like, why would you play that over something like Mark of the Lotus, Power of the Wild, and
Yeah, the
Druid in
problem
particular?
is, the fact that it's a death rattle on a minion means that, you're going to struggle to adequately control it, right?
Yeah,
You know, it's the problem. The problem comes down to this sort of fundamental thing of, if your opponent gets to dictate when and how it gets triggered, that usually makes it substantially worse.
yes,
So the fact is, you playing this, a lot of times you aren't activating it, you aren't proccing it immediately, unless you want to play this and Wrath on turn 7, to,
yeah,
to, to do a board clear. You're going to play this less on 5. Now, if you've, let's say, got a board, your opponents then might go, okay, you've chosen the buff, and then first try clear the other minions, It
yeah,
might make their turns more awkward, but I still, it makes it awkward, but it's still like, they can play around it, I think.
yeah. So I think To me, the biggest side is actually just for slower decks, it does offer some kind of AoE clear. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I think its stat line is a little underwhelming, and I'm going to be giving it a 2 for playability.
Yeah, I'll give it a 3 because I do see that I can see its effects being strong, but I'm not 100% sure which decks actually want it, Like I don't think Token Druid wants it. I'm not sure if a slower deck wants it.
Yeah, it is.
Like
I
if you
mean,
want it for the AoE, should you not want Starfall rather than, even though it's one less damage, it's guaranteed.
it helps Quest Druid because it has that 5 attack. So, there's that. No, there isn't really. So that's kind of that's my big problem. I don't see a good deck for it to go into, and that's why
Yeah.
I don't think it's like I think it could be playable in the future, but not now, and that's why I'm
Yeah,
gonna be
I
giving
mean,
it
maybe if they come with
a 2.
more, because one thing I want to comment is I do like the whole secretly thing. Like it
Yeah,
adds a new dimension of like sort of I think a layer of skill to it in terms of you know like now I think part of it might even be like mind games of okay, you think they've they've chosen the deal 3 damage, but in fact they've chosen the buff.
yeah. I think
I mean,
it is just really important that they're adding these new interesting ways to use death rattles and using the choose ones, and I really do like the flavor of it. It is a really interesting card and an interesting direction for um, Druid in particular. So yeah. But moving on, next we have Spreading Plague. So Spreading Plague is a 5 mana rare spell that reads Summon a 1/5 Scarab with Taunt. If your opponent has more minions, cast this again. So, in a really roundabout way, all this basically saying is summon 1/5 taunts equal to the difference between your minions and your opponent's minions. So if
yes,
you have 1 minion on the board and they have 3, you'll get 2 1/5 taunts. If they have 4 and you have none, you'll get 4 1/5 taunts. If
yes,
they have 2 and you have 1, you'll get 1/5
yes,
taunt.
yeah.
So, it's an interesting way to word it. The cast again thing is maybe like, does it count for more yogs? I'm not sure
That's
about
exactly what
that.
I was wondering as well.
But ultimately, beyond that little nuance, really, you're just getting 1/5s for the number of minions they have in difference, right? That's the
Yes,
big difference versus something like Unleash the Hounds, which is just equal to the number of minions they have. In this case, it's equal to the difference in minion
the
count.
difference. Yeah, exactly.
So, what do you think about this card?
It's an interesting card. I'm not sure if it like really has a deck or a place. 5 mana is a bit expensive, so like with these things, you've got to immediately think, okay, a 1/5 with taunt. How many of them do I need to get for this card to be decent?
Yeah,
Because 1/5 for 5 is bad. Two
yeah,
2/5s for all 5
bad.
is probably still bad.
No, it's
Uh, you know,
definitely bad.
three 1/5s.
Bad.
I mean, what that then? I mean, you start heading to what? That's three.
It's three
That
fifteen stat.
18 with the stats. That starts becoming decent, right?
No, but they're 1/5s, so they
Yeah,
get
one
traded
five.
into so easily. The fact is
Yeah.
that 1/5 body is just so weak and underwhelming that, like, even 3 of them I think is still bad. 4 of
So
them is still
yeah, 4 or 5,
bad.
you start pushing playable. I think.
I honestly still think that if they summoned 4 every time, I would probably still not play it.
Yeah, a 5 mana. Is it? Would it be fast enough to
Because
stabilize its
remember, the
aggro?
fact is, it's not just, oh, it summons 4 1/5 taunts. It summons equal to the amount of minions they're ahead of you. So that means they
Yeah,
always have minions to trade into this. Sure, they
yeah,
might have to trade 2 minions into 1, but they're always going to be favorable trades because it's unlikely those minions are on 1 health, right?
yeah.
The way you
No, no,
play
definitely.
around swipe in particular against Druid means that you're not going to leave your board with a bunch of 1 health minions. This is another card that sort of falls into that weakness of if they're playing around swipe, they're going to be playing around spreading plague as a happenstance.
Yeah, and well, I mean, there's a chance it might soften them up for a swap, but yeah, I'm not quite sold on it. I
No.
mean, there's obviously the potential synergy with the next card we can talk about, the Strong Soul Scavenger. I mean, there's
Yeah.
obviously that Wombo combo.
Yeah. But ultimately, I'm going to give Spreading Plague a 1. I think the card is
Yeah,
pretty unplayable in almost any deck. For token decks as well, it's pretty bad because token decks you want to be ahead on the board, right? That's the
yeah,
one other consideration you would have. Oh, no, if I can summon a bunch of tokens, that's good. But it's a bunch of tokens on the condition you're behind on the board, and that's not really where the token deck wants to be. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a 1.
Yeah, I'm gonna
It's
give it
honestly close
a
to a 0, but
yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1. Maybe yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of Strong Shell Scavenger, that is the next card we're going to be talking about. Strong Shell Scavenger is a 4 mana 2/3 minion, and it has Battle Cry. Give your taunt minions +2/+2.
It's
So
basically bolster.
yeah, basically
It's,
it has
it's,
Battle Cry Bolster. Bolster, bad card. There was no real good way to build around it. Agreed.
yeah, I
This
tried.
this card, bad card.
uh,
I'm pretty
it's
sure that
it's a little bit
bolster.
better.
The bolster mechanic is less supported in Druid
Yes.
than in Warrior,
Uh,
even though.
this card though, in a nut, objectively, I think is better because you've got the body at least, but it's still not good. I
Yeah,
still think it's bad. I mean, like I said, for 9 mana you can get the wombo combo of Spreading Plague plus this, and you have a bunch of 3/7s.
ooh.
Y-
I mean, 3/7's pretty good, but no.
Yeah, but 9 mana though,
9 mana, and you had to be behind on the board. But how did you
exactly,
not die if you were like behind on the board enough to get enough value from it? So,
exactly. So,
yep. Strong Shell Scavenger, a big nope from me. I'm gonna
yeah,
give it a 1 for playability. I think
no,
if they want to
one.
push this archetype, it could be something in the future, but for now, no.
For now, it's also not worth. Even though you play things like Tar Creeper, once again, for this buff to be really good, you need to at least buff 2 taunt minions, right? Because
I don't think
you
so,
know,
yeah.
because a 4 mana 4/5 is decent, like in
But you
terms of
wouldn't play
4/5
it.
stats. But you wouldn't play a vanilla 4/5. You don't play Yeti anymore. You know, whereas if it starts buffing 2 taunt minions, then you can start saying, okay, now maybe this starts getting good,
Yeah,
and it's that consistency.
yeah. I mean, it looks like a great card in a token deck, but it has to be a token taunt deck, and that deck's not there.
Token taunt deck.
So,
Yeah.
speaking of token taunts, the next card we have is Druid of the Swarm. This is a 2 mana 1/2 minion, but not really, because it has choose one, transform into a 1/2 with poisonous, or a 1/5 with taunt. So, very much like the Druid of the Claw and other such cards, when it's actually played, it does transform into this either a 1/2 with poisonous or a 1/5 with taunt. So
Yeah.
basically, the two major minion types we're seeing a lot from, or token types
Druid.
in this, in this set for Druid is the 1/2 poisonous spiders and the 1/5 scarabs with taunt. We've seen it in a lot of the cards we've gone over so
Yeah.
far,
Yeah. A few
and the
cards.
Death Knight. So how good is just a 2 mana 1/2 with poisonous, or sometimes a 1/5 with taunt?
Okay, so 2 mana 1/2 poisonous. It's a smaller Emperor Cobra. It's basically a slightly worse gastropod
Yes, it's a worse
because it doesn't have
gastropod.
taunt.
Yes.
What's it, the stubborn gastropod? So it's like mid to late game on an empty board. It's not bad because it still discourages your opponent from playing something big.
But it's
That
pretty
first.
easy for them to kill it with like just 2
Yes.
damage.
Yeah. So for the most part, I think if you're playing this, it's going to be a 2 mana 1/5 taunt. And now that, if you start looking at that, I think a 2 mana 1/5 taunt is actually pretty decent stats wise.
Yeah. I think
Like,
in let's say a token deck, it could offer you an option
yeah.
to, very much like Tar Creeper. The big thing about Tar Creeper is not that you need taunts to protect your life total. It's actually that you want taunts to protect your minions. So the more
Yes.
minions you have, the better value you get from your board-wide buffs like Mark of the Lotus, Power of the Wild. And it also allows you to set up better trades, right? So
Yes.
really, the use of taunt to actually protect your other minions is pretty much where Druid of the Swarm would have to fit in. The
And
big
a 2 mana
concern is
1/5 I
that
think is pretty decent as like the 5 health is pretty big as well, I think.
the 5 health is pretty big, but the 1 attack is pretty minimal. And I
Yeah,
think that's
obviously.
that's the big concern here, right? You really need to be buffing Druid of the Swarm up once, or maybe
Yes.
even twice before it really becomes worth it.
Yeah,
The big difference with Druid of the Swarm and Tar Creeper is Tar Creeper, at least during your opponent's turn, has that extra 2 attack,
yes, which allows for better. Yeah.
which makes
I don't know.
trades more awkward, yeah.
This even just one buff to a 2/6 I think makes it quite good. So I see this possibly. I would not even be surprised if this replaced like Tar Creeper, or as an additional to Tar Creeper.
I
In
honestly don't think I would replace Tar Creeper because most of the time I don't really need different 2 drops, right? I think the big question for this card and when it comes to Token Druid is where does Token Druid rather want to spend the mana? Does it want to
Yeah.
spend the mana on 3 for something slightly better, or does it want us to have another 2 drop? And ultimately, I don't believe you do want more 2 drops. Tar Creeper is also good in the deck because it's a 3 drop, and
Yeah.
it turns out well. Like, Obviously, the curve of going this into Vicious Fledgling is
Yeah,
pretty
it's not
decent, right? Because
strong.
it protects your Fledgling from minion
I think they're
trades.
both going to be beasts as well, so it's got potential synergy with Mark of Yeshurant as well.
Yeah, if the scarab is
I'm quite sure
probably a
they'll both be
beast,
beasts,
and the
right?
spider, yeah, the spider should be a beast. So yeah, there is definitely that synergy that Tar Creeper doesn't have, and maybe that's enough to push it over the edge. But ultimately, I think this card is probably not going to see play on most of the token druid decks, unless of course they need to be, let's say, very conscious of AoE. Like if you need
Yeah.
a token that's going to survive AoE a bit better, then the taunt also is an option there. So ultimately, I'm going to give this a 3 for playability.
Yeah, I'm
I
also going to go
think
with the.
I think it's playable, and certainly in let's say a budget token druid, if you don't have some of the other cards, it's definitely a card you can slot in there. But ultimately, I don't think we're actually going to be seeing it much in token druid because I don't think it will be part of the tier one token druid lists.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a three, but like for me, it's actually three lean towards a four because I actually think it's really strong. Like I think like the stats and the additional taunt also helps to protect your like you say against the minions. But yeah, the main issue is that there are other two drops as well already in the token druid that you ask yourself, do you need like is there space in a two drop slot?
Yeah. Okay. And speaking of 1/2 poisonous spiders, as that seems to be a theme for Malfurion the Pestilent and his druid friends in this expansion, we have Webweave. Webweave is a 5 mana common druid spell, and it reads summon 2/1/2 poisonous spiders. So,
Yeah.
how would you pay 5 mana for half of Malfurion's battle? Like, choose one comes into play
No,
effect?
I do not think this card is good.
Yeah.
On
So,
turn five, you do not want to be playing two stubborn gastropods.
no. Comparing it to, let's say, Living Mana, you'd
Or
almost never want
Blizzard
to play this.
Hydra,
There's
or
there's no there's no reason you would play it in any kind of token deck. I think that's
even
the
Drill the
important thing to
Claw.
note.
Like I asked myself, Drill the Claw still seems better. Nourish,
Yeah.
Starfall, the other five drops I would rather be playing over this.
I think the one big selling point it does kind of have is that these are poisonous spiders, and that is sort of hard removal for Druid, which is a huge weakness of Druid, right? They have
But
no
it's
hard
like
removal, but
semi,
it's yeah, very conditional hard removal.
it's
Your
very
opponent has to
super
have no
astro.
way of clearing it, and they have to have no other minions. So it's only like good against one big minion where they don't have board clear or any way to deal with it. So
Yeah.
ultimately, I don't think that's the kind of situation that's going to be make it playable, especially at 5 mana for that
Yeah.
effect. So I'm gonna
Apparently, apparently in testing it was a four mana for a long time, and
yeah
apparently the one of the devs released the whole thing
yeah
about
Ixal.
they they changed it and it caused quite an uproar. Apparently it was four mana, and then the dev team felt it was too powerful at four mana.
Yeah, they were just putting it in every druid deck. So they also told us that Death Rattle Priest was
Yeah,
going to be the sleeper deck. So I'm
I'm
not
still
really
waiting
sure
for
about
that.
that. Um, so
Um,
yeah, I at 4 mana like maybe Webweave is okay, but even
Even
then
then,
probably not. So at
I
five
mean,
mana,
my
you know,
keeper. I mean, at four mana, I'm still want to play. I rather play my. You still my keeper.
well, I think that's like underestimating the poisonous effect. But anyway, that's not the point.
Yeah,
We're not going to be talking about what a card might have been. It is a five
yeah,
mana card, and at a 5 mana card, it's going to get a 1 from me.
yeah. I think one. I'm not a fan of it.
Cool. And then moving on to the next common we have for Druid, we have Crypt Lord. Crypt Lord is a 3 mana 1/6 with Taunt, and it reads after you summon a minion, gain +1 health. So this
So,
is for the
so,
Crypt Lord
so
itself.
yeah, it gives health to itself. Because I
Yeah.
initially, when I read it, I thought you gained the health, as in your hero,
Yeah.
right? But I then realized, when I think I saw one of the videos that it actually buffs itself,
Yeah, yeah, it does.
which makes it a little bit worse than I initially thought. Because I thought, hey, if you summon and you healing behind a taunt, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, but it
Like,
is. We're gonna come back to this. It's a 1/6 taunt, so very
yeah,
much like we've spoken about 1/5s and the innate weakness of only having that one attack when your opponent is going to be trading into them. Crypt Lord has that same problem, right? The big
yeah,
benefit of Crypt Lord is he can get bigger in terms of health, but really all that does is it just leaves like your opponent's just going to keep developing their board, right? You have to have a strong board alongside Crypt Lord to make real value of that health. So, ultimately, that kind of screams that this needs to be in like a tokeny deck, and
yeah.
then
Oh, I like this card. I think it's a a nice anti-aggro tool. Yeah, obviously the low attack is obviously not that handy, but I still think the fact that it can still soak up a fair bit of damage is going to be quite helpful.
Yeah.
Like I still think it's playable.
I think the card is decent. I think we have to compare it once again to Tar Creeper when we talk about
Yeah,
Token Druid. And ultimately, I think with their one attack, I probably wouldn't play it over Tar Creeper most of the time. Because even if we're getting it to 1/8 before it dies, right? That's like probably not good enough. Maybe it allows you to develop enough of a board that you snowball behind it, and that's really the big telling point for it, whether it's going to be good. But ultimately, I'm not sure that that is really going to be good enough. Like, I think it could definitely see play in a meta where there's lots of other aggro decks, and Token Druid needs to have more
yeah.
ways to make sure that it has sort of control over how the board is trading. Then it could see play. But ultimately, there needs to be a lot of aggro decks with pretty small minions to have it
Lots
see
of one
play.
health
And in like
minions.
a mid-range meta, Crypt Lord is pretty bad.
Yeah,
So ultimately, I'm going to give Crypt Lord a 3 for playability. I once again think, like Druid of the Swarm, it could find a play and a place in some decks, and it is a budget alternative in some Token Druid decks. But ultimately, I don't think, especially without the Beast tag, which is
yeah,
kind of interesting because it seems like it should be a beast, same as Fate Spinner, to be honest. I'm a little bit confused as
yeah,
to whether these insects are beasts now, but and whether the scarabs will even be beasts. But yeah.
yeah. That's true.
Um, so yeah, I am not a fan of Crypt Lord. I'm gonna give it a 3, pretty much.
Yeah,
And
you
you?
see, like I think it's decent. So I'm also gonna give it a 3, but for me, it's it's 3 leading towards the higher amounts of 3. Whereas probably for you, it's leading lower parts of 3.
Yeah, for me it's a 3, sort of maybe even a 2, and same for Druid of the Swarm. And for you, it seems to be more a 3 leaning towards a 4.
Yeah, that's for me.
Okay, and then the final Druid card we have is Nash. So Nash is a 3 mana Druid spell, and it gives you, or it reads, give your hero +3 attack this turn and gain 3 armor. So it is a common, so probably pretty good in Arena, but outside of that, is this card going to be seeing constructed play?
No, yawn. This is basically a like this is a sort of a shameless copy and paste between claw and bite.
Yeah.
Like bite, I mean claw. It's the 1 mana. Give your hero +2 attack and 2 armor. Bite is 4 mana. Give your hero 4 attack and 4 armor. So this is literally just the. I mean, the biggest debate they would have probably had to have is do they make it cost 3 mana or 2 mana?
Yeah. At
And
2 mana, I
it
think it would
seems
have
too
been pretty
strong.
good. Yeah.
Two 2 mana seems a bit too strong.
At two
Like
mana, I think it would have definitely seen play, but
it would have been very good.
yeah.
Like like sometimes it does the same thing as Wrath. It would have been really good. At 3 mana, I'm not sold.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, speaking of Wrath, really for me, what this card screams is, do I need more Wraths in my deck?
yeah,
Or Wraths that are not as versatile, right? Because Wraths
yeah,
that cannot draw. So like
and get through
in
taunt.
a meta that is very token heavy, very aggro, like maybe Nash helps in that kind of a meta to help deal with minions. 3 lines up pretty well against some important minions right now, like Murloc War Leader, for instance. But ultimately, I don't really think that this card is going to find a place because ultimately I think it kind of just gets beaten out by cards like Wrath
No,
or
or even
Swipe
just Feral
or even
Rage.
Feral Rage. Yeah.
I think Feral Rage is just mostly better, right? Yes,
Yeah.
you don't get both, but +8 armor or +4 attack, I think is just better than getting +3 and 3.
So even though the card is maybe not that bad, it's just not that good compared to the other options that are available
Exactly.
for
Like at
Druid.
2 mana, I would have gone yes. Okay, I would have then seriously considered playing. So for me, I'm going to give this, I think, like a 1 or maybe a 2 because it's not like a bad card per se. It's just it's average.
Yeah, maybe when Feral Rage rotates out, maybe it becomes an option.
Yeah, that's true.
But for now, yeah, I'm gonna go with outside of maybe like a really spell heavy Yogg deck. I think I'm also gonna give it a 2. But to me, honestly, it's leaning slightly more towards the 3 because I actually think it is a decent card.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's
But for
not
you, it
like
seems to
a
be more
bad card.
leaning towards the 1.
No, for me, it's a solid 2. Like
Okay.
that's the thing because I accept that it's not a bad card per se. It's just currently there are better cards.
Okay. So that's all the cards we have. But now we have the really interesting part. We have some deck lists that we've prepared before to discuss, and this is going to help us contextualize some of these cards and figure out maybe the direction some of the druid decks could be going in this expansion. So we have starting off two ramp sort of easy druid themed decks and one more greedy token deck. So firstly we have your ramp deck. Let actually I think let's talk about mine first. Mine is probably a little bit closer towards existing easy big easy druid. So we have a deck here with double innovate, earthen scales, um, wild growth, wrath, like double tar creeper, um, double swipe, bonds, single Maya keeper, double nourish, single starfall, moonglade portal, one moonglade portal, one bone drake. Okay, well, like basically the changes that I've made, right, is ultimate infestation. Currently I have two in the deck, but ultimately I really do think that you probably would only run one. It kind of seems very greedy to run more than that, as we kind of discussed a little bit. But currently I have two in, and also the Lich King. So we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about the neutrals a bit later. But the Lich King is an 8 mana 8/8 with Taunt that gives you a random Death Knight card to your hand every turn. So the big thing for the Lich King in terms of the Easy Big Easy Druid is that it is another taunt that can be brought out by Giant Anaconda, and it does have value from Barnes because it has that end of turn effect, right? So that's really
Yes.
why I see the Lich King fitting into this deck.
And just to clarify for people, the Death Knight cards are separate. There are 8 of them, and they kind of, in a way, similar to the Dream cards from Ysera in that they are undercosted spells. Just to make sure people aren't confused. When they
Yeah,
first bought it, everybody's like, "Is it going to give you like a Death Knight, as in the legendary hero cards?" Because that would have been really stupid.
yeah. That would have been quite crazy. So I mean, the big talking point of this deck is that it is very greedy because I tried to keep a lot of the dragon package because Deathwing Dragonlord is Deathwing Dragonlord and Deathwing are so strong, right? It actually has what 5, 10 costs minions and spells
So
with
what did you
Yashaj,
cut? You cut Ken and what, the Ironbeak Owl?
yeah, and one Moonglade Portal. But ultimately, probably I'd put the Ironbeak Owl in back in place of the Ultimate Infestation. I think that's
Yeah.
probably wrong to have two
And this is
copies of
very,
that.
just a warning though, this is a very expensive deck in terms of dust.
Yes.
12,960.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing though is Bone Drake in this deck. So Bone Drake is a 6 mana 6/5 dragon with Death Rattle, add a random dragon to your hand. So we kind of looked at the dragons beforehand when we were talking about the deck off stream, and we kind of discussed that mostly there's pretty good dragons. The dragons are generally pretty high value, and so
Yeah.
getting a dragon in your hand is pretty good. And because I also cut Ysera, uh, the Bone Drake also offers us an extra dragon to get from Deathwing Dragonlord, as well as by putting an extra dragon in your hand, also offers another option for Deathwing Dragonlord, right? So we've added Lich King and Ultimate Infestation that are kind of adding a little bit more heal in a way. Lich King has the taunt versus the Ysera, and that's ultimately I think why I've favored Lich King over Ysera in this
Well,
deck. And then we have the Ultimate Infestation that at least has the armor, which is kind of why I felt that I could cut a Moonglade portal as well.
'cause you feel like you have enough healing.
Yeah. Okay, but I also added a second Tar Creeper, right? Just because I felt like the deck needed a little bit more of the early game too, because of how greedy it was in the late game. Ultimately, I think this deck is a little bit too greedy and probably more of this version of the deck, at least, is a more tech choice against a, a very control meta or for like let's say a tournament where you need to be a little bit greedier, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, that Giant Anaconda Lich King synergy is the interesting part that might be sort of might affect the easy big easy druid lists. So then we have your list, which is quite different. We're not gonna.
Yeah, I've got a really off the wall approach. So I took the shell of sort of your easy big easy yeah, your the easy big easy druid, and I kind of removed the whole expensive, like the Yesharaj package, and basically what I've gone for is you're ramping into like Malfurion and Ultimate Infestation. Uh, and you'll see even like I don't know if it's actually any good, but like as a gimmick, like I put in a Medivh because some of your Druid spells are actually you've got Nourish, Moonglade Portal, and obviously the Dream is Ultimate Infestation, right?
Yeah. Ul-
So
Ultimately, like we were discussing, two ultimate infestations in my list is probably pretty bad because there's too many. But because you cut all the other top end, is it not just playable to play two ultimate infestations in a deck? Especially because you're also playing the Medivh.
in this list, it might actually be viable.
Like, is it
You'll see.
not better than Fate Spinner? That would be my big question.
Yeah, that's probably what I would possibly swap. I mean, the thing is, I would want to try Fate Spinner over like Starfall because that card was a Starfall previously, and it's a case of
Sure.
might Starfall not just still be better?
I mean, the big question, the thing is, once again, with the death rattles, yeah, it's like you're giving your opponent the choice to when to activate it, where Starfall, you get to activate
Yeah.
yourself, right? That's the biggest
The interesting
point.
thing about this one is I kind of included sort of a gimmicky curator package. So obviously the
Mm,
primordial drakes are pretty standard, but I've included a Kodo, which I think is still decent removal,
yeah.
and corrupted seer as extra AoE. Obviously it's bad against like Murloc Paladin, but I think against a lot of other decks it's still not bad to clear the board.
Yeah, I do like this build. I think it's quite interesting. It's a lot less greedy, ironically, than my list.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got the double Crypt Lord,
yeah,
because I think
also the
it's
double Crypt Lord to help with the. But I think Crypt
yeah,
Lord is just bad in this deck. I think I would always rather play Tar Creeper
yeah, it
because
might
you
be, but
you
I mean
really you're not a token deck.
yeah. So yeah, the Tarkeeper might just be better there, but it's trying to just how many new cards can you shove into a deck without making it really bad?
Yeah, that's basically the approach you've gone for here. Was I tried to put less of the new cards in, but I maybe went a little bit too greedy in my approach. I
But
think
yeah.
I really do think if you're playing Barnes, like Bone Drake is pretty good. You
Oh, and
cut the whole Barnes thing as well
yeah,
though, as well as cutting Maya Keeper.
yeah. Another sort of obviously wombo combo is if you can ever put off Bright Art Scout into Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah, because
That
that
is
five mana Ultimate Infestation is pretty nuts.
yeah, this guy. I mean, that would be quite bonkers. I mean,
Yeah,
it's much like 5 mana Deathwing is pretty good.
yeah. But five mana Deathwing can actually sometimes be kind of awkward because there isn't really a board where you want to play it on because you don't want to use the original Deathwing because you don't want to discard your hand, and you don't want to
Yeah.
use Dragonlord because you don't have other dragons in hand. Like it's a legitimate problem I ran into many times playing Easy Big Easy Druid when
Take it
you would
awkward at
Bright Eyed
times.
Scout. So I really do like that idea of the Bright Eyed Scout into Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like I cut it because I felt like I had to make space,
Yeah,
and
but
I
yeah, I've
needed a
gone
little
for a
bit more
much
space. But
like leaner board in terms of like no Yeshurats, no big Dragon Wing. The way I'm winning this game is going to be Medivh, and Ultimate Infestation, and Malfurion. So mine
honestly,
is a
this
more
is like a Medivh ramp druid, really, rather than like easy big, right?
yeah,
Because
exactly,
you don't have your
exactly.
charge, which is like the big
That's why
boy
I've
that
called it Ramp
matters.
Druid and not Easy Druid.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And you don't even have the anacondas. So,
no, I don't have the Anacondas, so
yeah.
it's a
So
fair
yeah,
bit different.
yeah. Your list really doesn't benefit from anaconda though. It wouldn't make sense. All you have is
Exactly.
Lich King and Medivh, and you don't want to
And
pull Medivh.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah. I think it is definitely kind of a list we could maybe see for Malfurion to find space for him. And I really do I like the Medivh Ultimate Infestation thing.
Yeah, I mean,
But
not to
yeah,
mention, I mean, even if you play Medivh and then next turn you play Nourish, it's still not bad.
yeah,
Or Swipe. I mean, it's not horrifically bad.
yeah. It is still some value. So there's definitely two sort of directions to take that kind of deck, and we've definitely shown two very different directions for the Ramp Druid deck. And I think Ramp Druid will definitely be a deck to consider. If you have the big minions and stuff, then it helps a lot against Jade Druid, right? It's kind of stronger against Jade Druid. Like it wins the Druid mirror in the sense because especially if you have the dragons, and that's one of the main reasons I didn't want to cut Deathwings, both of them, is that the
Yeah,
12/12 dragons just kind of smash
everything.
Jade Druid. Well, I was gonna say smash Jade Druid because they don't have the big removal, right? We've spoken about Druid's
Yeah,
weakness being the big removal. Well, your deck's not really threatening that many big minions, so that can be a little bit of a weakness of yours versus, let's say, my list.
yeah,
Obviously, we do. I think both think that Jade Druid will definitely still be a thing, but it's not that interesting a deck list because it's not going to necessarily change that
Change
much.
that much.
It has some
So that's why we
flex
didn't really
slots,
make
so
lists because, well,
yeah. And Token Druid, I think also we've spoken about it a bit through the card review. It's probably not going to change that much, but Pandemonia here does have a very different version of Token Druid that
yeah,
he's
it's
come up with here.
it's a
So
very gimmicky build. I think I don't
y-
even
d-
know. Like, it's probably not even good. But
yes, I think it's not good. But do you want to give us a summary of like what are the key talking points of this deck?
so this is kind of a throwback to. So currently, people, you say token druid, and people immediately think of the aggro druids currently with, living mana and what's it, fireflies, and this and vicious legends. But like this is kind of a tribute, sort of a flashback to like the original token druids, and the original token druids relied on the combos of like Violet Teacher with Power of the
Plus like cheap
Wild,
spells and yeah.
yeah, with cheap spells. So that's kind of what I've gone for, yeah. I'm running cards like the Violet Teacher, like people like we're talking earlier about the Earthen Scales, and basically it's a cheap spell as well as being able to gain a bit of life helps you obviously against early aggro. I run the Mark of the Wild, the Power of the Wild, but then I'll include the Druid of the Swarm because in a token deck I think it can be decent. If you can get one or two buffs on it.
Yeah, and this is a slower deck that wants a little bit of time. You want to protect your Violet Teachers, for one,
I
and
ran
and you
one.
want to also protect your well, like the poisonous minions might not be that bad sometimes for you as well.
I'm running a spreading plague purely like there's some potential synergies like late game. Like you might need you can kind of maybe come back. I don't know with that with Power of the Wild or that Mark of Lotus might be decent.
There's some nice anti-synergy with Violet Teacher because you're going to get a minion from the spell, and then
Yeah,
you're going to get one less 1/5. I think. I think.
yeah, and then Fate Spinner
In
still. I
fact,
mean,
in fact, if you cast it again every time, does Violet Teacher proc every time?
I'm not
Do you
actually sure.
do
Yeah,
you
I'm not
get
sure.
multiple anti synergies there?
Trust, yeah. Yeah, Fate Spinner. I'm still not like so. You'd actually have to play the deck to see does
Mm.
Fate Spinner maybe have a good. Buffing all your 1/1s might be good, right?
Yeah, but
Uh,
like the biggest concern I have with this deck is you call it token druid, but really there's not that many. It's really very all in on the Violet Teacher as a token generator. There's
yeah,
no living mana even, and
yeah.
that's
So
quite
yeah,
crazy to me.
it's a gimmicky idea. It's probably not going to work. I'm probably not even going to try it out. But it's an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah, it's like what kind of deck would maybe some of these cards work in, right? And I think this kind of also highlights to us that Spreading Plague is pretty bad. Fate Spinner also pretty just really doesn't have a
Not as
spot.
great as I thought it was initially.
Yeah, I think you just wanted to play Yogg. That's why you built
Pretty
this
much.
version of the deck list. Okay, so that's all we really have for the Druid. What is your thought about Druid overall? Where do you think Druid are going to be sitting in the meta?
I
Um,
still think Druid is going to be in the top half of the meta. It's still going to be I think it's still going to be a viable class. I think it's still going to be a strong class. Um, so in terms of particular archetypes, which ones are going to dominate? We'll have to see how the meta goes. But I definitely think Druid got enough strong tools from whether it's the class cards as well as even some of the neutrals that help it quite a lot. So
hmm.
I don't think Druid's going. I don't think Druid is becoming Warlock. Is going to become Warlock tier anytime soon.
No, I mean Jade Druid. Sorry, Druid still has Jade Druid to fall back on as well,
Yeah,
which is a deck that obviously it's pretty meta dependent.
yeah,
In times when we had, let's say, Quest Rogue and decks like that that really punished it. If there's a heavy mid-range meta, then Jade Druid's not all that good. But
yeah.
we also have Token Druid. So Druid has already two very strong decks on opposite sides of the spectrum, and it's going to take a very weird meta to push both of those decks out and to make Druid not have a good tier one or top
Exactly.
tier deck. And that's really the big thing here for Druid. Druid's in a pretty good place right now. I'm not really sold on a lot of these new cards. Honestly, you can see we kind of rated most of them pretty low. I don't actually think many of these new cards will see too much play in the class cards. I'm mostly just curious about the ultimate infestation and maybe some of the changes that the neutral cards could have on the druid lists that we were talking about.
Exactly. So
So
time will tell.
yeah, time will tell, but druid is not looking too bad, and yeah, we that's all we really have for this druid review. We're going to be doing a lot more of these reviews, so um, please like, subscribe, follow, all those kind of things. You can find us on Twitter, and we will, and you can leave any comments, any things you think we missed about the cards, or any maybe deck ideas you have. We'll share these links to these decks in the description. So let us know if there's anything you have. Please, comments and all that help, and it helps the stream grow and gain more visibility. So thanks a lot. Cheers for
So
now.